right, so this is one of the mugs I trimmed and I've kept covered. It is cool to the touch. I can definitely tell there's some moisture in it. But as you are, for a good thing to do right now is sign it before the handle is on there and really carve your name and period in it. I forgot to do that, because if the handle's on there and you're flopping it around trying to sign it, you might bump the handle. All right, I'm gonna keep that covered while I do my other stuff for a minute. We're gonna try to go for a handle that kind of looks like an ear. Okay, it's a little bit thicker on top, a little thinner down at the bottom, okay? And it looks like it just kind of naturally grows out of there, and it's kind of softish and roundish, so it's comfortable to hold on to. All right, you will need water. You need a little piece of paper that I'll show you later. A fettling knife is good to have. A cleaner tool for scoring is good to have. A paintbrush to apply water and to smooth things out is also good to have. It says up there you need a little piece of clay about the size of a tennis ball. That's even more than you need. Okay, I have enough clay here to make like 3 or 4 handles actually, if I don't waste it. I also need my sponge. The handle clay is right over there on the counter. It says handle clay on it. Only use that clay. You're supposed to use brand new clay, not recycled clay, because you really bend it quite a bit. All right, you want a clean surface. You don't need it sloppy wet, but I'm just kind of picking up the dust. Okay, when you get clay out of a brand new bag, you may have to kind of claw it off of there. So that's all I'm gonna need really, okay, to make a handle. Remember, it hasn't been wedged. And if it's a little piece of clay, sometimes I'm just kind of rotating it and slapping it. And that kind of compresses the clay, makes it a little stronger. You can kind of wiggle it around in your hands a little bit. You can see it kind of rotating around itself. That's kind of like wedging too. Okay, that makes the clay in a little better shape for this. We're gonna make a coil. Think of a coil that's about the thickness of this fettling knife handle. That's a good kind of, as you can see, it's about, roughly in that size area. And most of your mugs won't be quite this big, but that's okay. So I just do this first, just kind of get a log going. When you roll like a coil, you want to make sure that the clay goes from your fingertips all the way to the heel of your hand. If you only go like this, it's never going to get round. It needs to go all the way around itself. Okay, so you have to go really back and forth quite a bit with a fairly stiff hand, and just doing that is hard sometimes at first. You have to take a little piece of clay like I just did and just kind of play with that and see if you can get it to be a pretty round coil, even though you're not going to use that. Another thing you want to do is slightly tilt your hand so your handle gets thicker to thinner a little bit. So a slight tilt of the hand will produce kind of a little bit of a spiky kind of feel. If that was a mini little cup, that could be a handle. Okay, it doesn't matter which way you make your hand slightly tilt. Now, if I keep using this clay, and some of you will, if you keep doing that, oh, I don't like it, you smush it together, wedge it, it's gonna start to dry out. And eventually, you're going to get cracks right there. So if that happens, this is still pretty good clay to wedge and use on the wheel. I'd put it in your bag of extra clay, okay, or save it. Now, I can use this later on and I'll show you how. Right now, again, my hands are getting dusty, so I'm just gonna barely get the dust off of there. Now I'll try to make a handle that I'm gonna use. Let's get that out of the way. Notice how long I'm going back and forth. Now here's a trick. If it starts to go floppy under your hand, stiffen your hand a little bit. Here's another trick. If you twist it a little bit, make it go the other way. Sometimes that helps make things rounder. Okay, and you can see that this handle, is roughly about that thick. This is way too big. I don't need that much. So I'm gonna cut some off back here. Again, we'll use that in a minute. That's gonna probably be plenty of a handle. Now we also want to gently flatten the front and the back of the handle. It kind of makes things a little more comfortable. And here's two ways to do it. You can do this. You can just drop it, okay? You can pat it very gently. But the one way to do it also, which is what we usually do, wet your thumb, use your knuckles as a stabilizer, and I'm gonna take my thumb and just run it right down the spine, and you make a little bit of an indent. You don't wanna make it really deep, just enough to kind of flatten it, and you're trying to have kind of equal pressure so you don't accidentally go in and up and down. You don't want it to be wavy. You want it to be kind of flattish. Sometimes you might make a little ridge right there. That's another reason your sponge comes in handy. You can just softly touch that to make it nice and round, thinking ahead that it's going to be comfortable. Now, I'm going to turn it over gently. Again, just like a brand new baby, be very, very gentle with it. You can do the same thing on the other side. And just barely touch it. Now, to make this handle come off of a mug like an ear, the angle you cut right up here is important. And what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna cut the handle straight. And again, the thicker part goes to the top. So that's what we're picturing. I'm not gonna cut it straight. I'm gonna cut it at a slight angle away from the tail. Okay, we'll save that, Clay, for something in a sec. Then I like to use my lap as another set of hands. So you don't want to hold the mug and everything at the same time. So here we go. I'm gonna make the top make contact somewhere in the top third. The bottom will make contact somewhere in the bottom third. Okay, and you can just kind of let it drape itself over. Whenever you have to pick it up, my fingers are on the inside and just barely touching the handle so it doesn't fall off. Now, I can kind of adjust. See, my thumb is holding the handle in place. I can adjust. I don't want to do that. That's too big, right? I'm gonna go like this. There's that little ear shape. And I might have a little extra down here. You usually don't want your handle to touch your foot that you have trimmed. Also, as I'm doing this, the best place to do this is at your table. Don't try to do it at your wheel. You just don't have the space and the surface to work on. Okay, I think that's going to be a handle that kind of works. Okay, up here it's kind of nice little fit right there. And you have to make little marks where you are going to score. And now you turn into a sculptor, just like you were when you're making your wind chime. I'm gonna put that down so it holds onto its shape. Now, this is the real exciting part. But as I'm scoring, and again, you must score it. You must. As I'm doing this, I will tell you this. When your pot is greenware, hasn't been fired yet, but you made something, do not touch the handle. It will just pop right off. Also, if your pot is bisque fired, just like the vocabulary today, don't hold it by the handle. It's not permanent yet until after it gets glaze fired. Now you can hold it by the handle. It's nice and strong. Okay? I've had handles drop off way before it got glaze fired. We cannot fix it. It will not go back. Especially if you try to glue it back on there, and it has to go through a higher firing, the glue will not withstand that higher firing. Okay, just like sculpting, gonna add a little water, but there's one other step to take here. We're going to make like a little coin. This will help make it really attach. Whenever handles break off, usually it's up here, okay, that it kind of starts to separate. So we're gonna make a little coin, I like a little blueberry here. I'm just gonna squish it. One that's roughly the size of this little spot where we have scored. Gonna score this again in multiple directions. This is just an extra bit of fresh clay to prevent it from separating later. All right, instead of The paintbrush, I can just barely dip that in water. Now I'm going to just give that, again, equal pressure on the inside. Give it a little push and smush. Kind of blend it in a little bit. We'll do more of that later. Now I have to score again. And that just makes sure, again, it's a little safety. This happens especially when your clay is a little on the dry side. If you let your mug dry out a little bit, it's gonna separate. A little water, boom, boom, boom. Now, we always score both surfaces. So I just rest it against my leg right here. And again, score, 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 score. Score, score, back and forth in multiple directions. It's like you cannot score too much. And I need a little bit of water. Drip, 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 drip. Water there. And I like to start from the bottom, give it a little pressure, and then let it meet up at the top. Again, anytime you apply real pressure, you have to have your fingers on the inside of your mug, kind of providing opposite pressure. So a little pressure. Here we go again, a little wiggle, a smush and push. Wiggle, smush and push. Just to make sure it's secure. Then a paintbrush comes in really handy for two reasons. The brush handle is a really good little blending tool. Your fingers can do that too. But your brush handle is a little smaller. It can get in and around there. I'm going to do the same thing on the inside. Now don't look at it accidentally like this. Don't turn it. I held onto it because it'll just flop right off into the floor, and then you'll have to say, it's okay, I can make another one. Now the brush with a very tiniest bit of water, notice I'm kind of wiping the brush out. Now I can do a little bit of cleanup. Any of the little bits of clay that kind of smushed out, which is a good thing. This is that cleanup process. You might see a couple little brush strokes, but that all goes away. Okay, now to store this thing, just like your sculptures, we have to store it overnight under plastic. And here's how you do it. You get a board. Whoopsie, I just bumped into my pot. Did I make a big hack out of it? Oh, that wipes away. All right, now I'm going to kind of get a piece going, a piece of clay to act as a little support right under here. This part's important. It'll help keep it from moving overnight. So you can see I'm making a little angle that will hopefully just tuck right under there with a little piece of paper. So I'm going to put a little piece of paper right there so those two pieces of clay don't stick together. And I'm going to just, if I squish the clay, it bumps into the handle a little bit, right? So I'm just going to squish the clay bare. I just want to make sure there's a little bit of contact. Now, under plastic, I usually go a couple little sprinkles, and this is a gentle parachute over your clay. Whoops, I got water down inside. I don't want that. Okay, so a little parachute. And then this, the best place for that, if there's room in your locker, or you can certainly leave it on your table shelf in the back. It has to stay like this overnight. Then tomorrow we can take it out. And if all looks good, we can put it outside to be fired, just like we've done with your other pieces. Coolio? Right on. That's it. Thank you. Cut.